This is the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast, presented by TheHoosier.com. Welcome in, Hoosier Nation. We're back for another edition of the TheHoosier.com postgame wrap-up after a dominant Indiana performance, 113-72 over Penn State. We got to start with one place, Kyle. You're at Assembly Hall. You just watched history get made. Lamar Wilkerson, he set the single-game record for threes with 10, which I believe, I want to get this right before I quote it, was previously held by Robert Johnson, Rod Wilmot, and Matt Roth, who hit 9. And then he broke Trayce Jackson-Davis's record for most points in a single game at Assembly Hall. With 44, Jackson-Davis had 43 against Marshall in 2021. And he is the 8th highest scorer in a single game in Indiana history, tying Jimmy Rail, who had 44 twice, only behind George McGinnis, Don Schlunt, Steve Downing, Mike Woodson, and Jimmy Rail. Lamar Wilkerson made history tonight for Indiana. What a performance from him.
Very, very special nights. I've been going to IU basketball games pretty much my whole life, right? And obviously, covering the team since 2021 and being in that media circle. I mean, there have been a few special moments, obviously, during the last few years or whatever. I do go back to Trayce Jackson-Davis setting all kinds of records for Indiana and, just seeing what he was able to do. But you come into this game and it's a bounce back. It's a bounce back type of game that Indiana needed, but you look at how they played, they pushed the pace super early, and the big thing is they just got Lamar Wilkerson going, right? And that obviously led to history, and I don't think anybody really came into this game tonight, any Indiana fan, or maybe not even a single player came in tonight thinking that history was going to be made tonight. And Lamar Wilkerson 10 of 15 from 3, truly special to see. And the big part of it was, and we've talked about it in games, prior to this one. It's all about trying to get Lamar Wilkerson going early, getting him in rhythm, and Indiana feeding off of that. And tonight, you saw the best version of Indiana I think you can possibly see. Obviously, they can improve in a lot of different areas, but when Indiana is out in transition, they're hitting the 3 ball, defending, causing turnovers, getting steals, scoring off of steals. Battling on the defensive glass. This is what the Indiana team can look like. And I know Penn State's a really bad team. Like, let's be honest here. They're going to be a bad team, probably going to be towards the end of the Big Ten standings. But Indiana did this 113-72 against a Power 5 team, a Big Ten team. That's super, super impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it was from the opening tip, it was dominant. Against Louisville, we had, a performance where Indiana slept walk through the first 8 minutes of that game, was down 16-0, and after that played pretty well. But tonight it was, came out guns a-blazing, Lamar Wilkerson hitting shot after shot. And before we knew it, this game was over. And, we both kind of have similar thoughts on Penn State. They probably are going to finish towards the bottom of the Big Ten, but they're 8-1 right now. Yeah, they haven't played the toughest schedule. It's a young team. But doing that against a Big Ten team, it's impressive. A 40-point win against most teams is very good, but against a Big Ten team, I think they said on the broadcast too, it's the first time Indiana has scored 100 points in a Big Ten game in 8 years. So not sure if that's 100% accurate, but if it is, wow, what a performance from Indiana.
8 years, right? It just seems like that was the black hole for Indiana, right? It just goes to show you that 8 years was really, really brutal for Indiana. I'm looking at the rebounding numbers and stuff. Indiana did win 28-21, but the thing is they didn't really need to rebound a whole lot, more than what they did tonight, because they were just so good at, picking the pocket of Penn State, causing turnovers, getting live ball turnovers, points off of rebounds. Points off of turnovers. They had 26 points off of turnovers. That's super, super impressive. And then Penn State also had 14 turnovers. Indiana had 10. So Indiana did a really good job of taking care of the ball for the most part. I thought the guard play in the backcourt was super good. I mean, obviously, the main story here is Lamar Wilkerson, 44 points. But let's look at Tate Conaway, 17 points, 7 of 9 from shooting, 2 from 2 from 3. Trying to look at his turnovers. Only had 2 turnovers, and obviously that's the big thing with Tate, is just limiting those turnovers. But a really, really special performance by him as well. And he stepped up, and it just goes to show, when you have this Indiana backcourt, if they're clicking and they're making the plays that they need to do on both ends of the floor and hitting their shots, they can be one of the best backcourts in the Big Ten tonight. You got a little bit of taste of that.
Yeah, I was trying to find how far, Indiana had 30 assists tonight. I was trying to go back. Basketball Reference, I think, goes back to 2010 for college basketball stats. Indiana has never had more than 30 or has never hit 30 assists in that time. Like as far as I could go back before the errors started happening on the website. So, the ball movement too. We talked about it, how the ball's always moving. Even when Lamar Wilkerson, 44 points tonight, it wasn't like it was sticking and he was just holding, chucking shots. Even when, he was hunting the record and was really only in to go for records, he still was playing unselfish and had a couple assists. I think I want to say 4 assists for him, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals. Like it wasn't just the scoring for Wilkerson too.
No. He was definitely, in the flow of the game. I mean, everything was running through him. He got a touch pretty much every single possession. I thought he was really good on the cutting as well, working off of off-ball screens as well. And that's a sneaky part of his game. And he made a few really good plays in transition, attacking the basket, being aggressive. And that's what good shooters do. They attack, right? And they can open up a whole lot more of their game. And you saw that when Wilkerson's in that flow and he's in the shot, it's all about getting him really going early and getting him into that rhythm early. And I'll also throw in that Penn State, I don't think they followed the scout at all because they did give Lamar Wilkerson a lot of opportunities there. So you got to kind of, you take that if you're Lamar Wilkerson any day of the week. So you do look at, just at the whole entire, roster. Indiana had 5 guys scoring double figures. You had Tucker DeVries 12 points, Reed Bailey, and we'll talk about him here in a second. I thought this was a really good performance by Reed Bailey. He had 18 points, and Nick Bourne had 13 points off the bench. Like, that's a really, really balanced scoring, and that's the type of scoring that you need to see from Indiana because it can't just be, Lamar Wilkerson. It can't just be Tucker DeVries carrying the load every night and everybody else having 10 or less points. You need a lot more from your guys. You need more balance for this team in order to be successful, in order to open up a lot more things for Indiana on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, I mean, it's the balance. You mentioned it, Reed Bailey. We should talk about him. One of his best performances of the season, and it comes in a game where he, gets moved to the bench.
Yep.
He comes off the bench for the first time this year and has one of his best games, 18-5, 6 or 6 in the field. Sam Alexis started, and he was really a non-factor. Only played 16 minutes, was in foul trouble, and Reed Bailey, was exceptional off the bench. Is a screener slipping to the rim. That's kind of been his strength throughout the year, and we saw that tonight.
Yeah, and I thought Coach DeVries kind of used him a little bit more different ways tonight. A little bit more than what we had seen, so far in Indiana. But I feel like we saw a little bit when he was with Davidson. They were using him in like high ball screens and stuff, and that allowed him to slip a little bit more. And you mentioned it. I think Reed Bailey's been at his best when he's been able to slip past the defense, be that roll man and finish above the rim. And tonight he did a really good job of that. I thought he made some really good passes. I think that's one of Reed Bailey's strengths as a big guy, his passing ability and court vision, finding those backdoor cuts. Tucker DeVries had a couple of backdoor cuts. He did miss a wide open layup. I think he was just a little bit shocked that he was that wide open, but, finished the other one with a 2-handed dunk. So Reed Bailey, yeah, definitely a really good performance by him. You do wish, and I've said this multiple times, you've said this multiple times, you do wish that Indiana just had another big guy that they could throw out and you can play Reed Bailey alongside with, because it could really be a really good advantage for Indiana to have 2 bigs on the floor at times. But I thought Reed Bailey, getting moved to the bench or a senior, that's really, really hard to do, especially when you've been starting every game up to this point. So I don't know long term if we're going to keep Sam Alexis in the starting lineup. I don't know if they're going to have Reed Bailey coming off the lineup, but regardless, I think you can get a good Sam Alexis performance. You can get a good Reed Bailey performance at any given night. It's just all about those 2 guys kind of locking in and doing what they need to do in the front court.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I've talked about this a ton throughout the year between them, who starts, and it really doesn't matter who finished. It's a game like tonight. You're never we're not gonna know just because if I have to assume, I would have assumed if it was close, Reed Bailey probably finishes this game. But again, we don't really know just because it was never in doubt after the opening 10 minutes. But I want to talk about the defensive side of the ball. I know you're gonna look at the box score. People are gonna be like, 72 points. Indiana forced 14 turnovers, scored 26 points off those turnovers, held Penn State under 1 point per possession, while Indiana, on the flip side, scored over 1.5 points per possession. Made it really difficult. A lot of Penn State's points kind of came late in the game when it seemed like the intensity kind of dropped and it was all about Lamar Wilkerson, chasing the records at that point. another really good performance from Indiana on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and I think this Indiana team, when they're at their best, they're obviously rebounding the ball, defensive rebounds, but they're just competing on the defensive end. And tonight, I think that was kind of a message going into it. Yes, they wanted to get their offense going. They wanted to get Lamar Wilkerson going, and those types of things. But they bought in on the defensive end, and they competed at that end. And Penn State, this will be one of the very few games this season where I feel like Indiana's got the advantage when it comes to talent and athleticism. And Indiana took advantage of that. Penn State just doesn't have those horses to run with Indiana. And then they kind of just started off on fire on the defensive end, causing turnovers, scoring off of those turnovers. I mentioned 26 points off of those 14 turnovers that Penn State had. I mean, that's when Indiana's really good. They can get out in transition and everything. And they just did a really good job of pressuring the ball, pressuring the on-ball guards, forcing them into tough shots. Held Penn State to just 46% shooting, while Indiana shot nearly 70% from the floor, which is also insane. But to show Indiana doing this against a Big Ten opponent, scoring 70% from the floor, while also having that type of defensive performance by Indiana, if they can do that on a consistent basis, I'm not saying they're going to do that all the time. Very unlikely that they do this all the time, but they can have that type of offense performance and a defensive performance to go along with that. It can be a really, really tough team and just be a team that you don't want to play in the Big Ten.
What makes this team so dangerous is that three-point ability. It's one of those things when they're shooting the ball like this, they can no one in the country is going to beat Indiana when they shoot the three ball like this. It's just, I don't want to say it's a fact, but it feels like it's a fact. Anyone who shoots, you hit 17 threes in a game, you're going to win. It's just one of those things. That's why this team's so dangerous. And we've talked about, it feels like there's a hard ceiling on, the potential of this team. But that three ball, it opens the games up. And, Indiana is going to be in a lot of games when they're outmatched talent size-wise because of their ability to shoot the ball from three. And on a night like tonight against the Penn State team that can't match the talent of Indiana, we see the result, a 40-point win.
And but, honestly, or go ahead. Sorry, Drew.
Oh, I was going to bring up Nick Dorn, but if you want to jump in before I get to Nick Dorn.
Before you get to Nick Dorn, because I know what you're going to ask here, and we'll wrap it up there. But, what I was going to say with three-point shooting is, like, obviously you haven't seen this from Indiana in 8 years. There's been a lot of times, by far Indiana has more on paper talented teams than what Indiana has this year. But it's always been the three-point shooting that's held them back. This three-point shooting, if they're hitting the ball, it's going to keep them in games. They can go into Rupp Arena and whatever, and if they're hitting the three ball, it's going to still be a tough place to win at. But they can, on Saturday, if they're hitting the three ball, they're going to stay in the game. That's just a fact. The three-point shooting has obviously, changed the landscape of college basketball. And Indiana's got guys that can really hit the outside shot, that can do it on a consistent basis. So if they're able to do that, they're going to stay in games no matter what. And then you pile on, obviously a good defensive performance along with it. That's a really, really tough team. And that's a really overall balanced team. So really impressive. And I tweeted this, when Lamar Wilkerson hit that 10-3 and broke the record. We are in a brand new era of Indiana basketball, and Coach DeVries understands that. I think he's the right guy to kind of, put this new era of Indiana basketball, this new style of play, on the floor here in Assembly Hall. And tonight you saw a really good example of that.
Yeah, so let's get to Nick Dorn, Kyler. You kind of know what I'm going to say. I'm going to kind of lead into it a little bit, but Nick Dorn, last 4 games, he has scored in double figures in 3 games against Bethune-Cookman. Louisville, he had 15 and then 13 tonight. He feels like kind of like a microwave off the bench for Indiana, like someone who can just score points in bunches. I said it in our group chat earlier. I think Nick Dorn next season, I don't know what the rest of the roster is going to look like, but Nick Dorn is going to lead this team in scoring a year from now. He has that feel of just like a scorer's feel where he can get to the basket, had a really nice up and under finish tonight, can shoot the three ball, can shoot the midi. Like, he's a 3-level scorer. It just happens to be he's behind Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, competing for minutes with those guys. So we're probably not going to see as much of the big numbers from him this year, but moving forward, especially next season, I think he's going to lead this team in scoring.
Indiana was desperate to have a guy like Nick Dorn, get into this rotation and stuff. And next year, depending on how the roster shapes up, I do see him a part of that starting lineup. I see Trent Sisley part of that starting lineup. Those are 2 guys that have been really, really impressive this year off the bench for Indiana. And Nick Dorn, he came in, slowly with this season, but his minutes have ticked up. What did he finish at minutes tonight? 25 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good number for Nick Dorn. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to be a factor for Indiana. And he showed some really good things this season as that scorer, that microwave scorer. And you nailed it. Yeah, he is a microwave scorer. He's built like a a brick house. He's a strong physical guy, pretty athletic guy. I still think he's trying to get his athleticism back a little bit, coming back from that injury. And he is a guy that's got a lot of potential for Indiana. I think Coach DeVries really likes using him, and if they can find ways to get him continued, I'm not going to say he's going to get 25 minutes a game, but if they can find ways to continue to get consistent minutes, he can be really good, as the season goes along. But, I didn't know what to expect with Nick Dorn coming into this season. I didn't expect to know, what was going to go on with a lot of these guys, but Nick Dorn has easily been one of the more impressive guys that I've watched so far this season, even if it has been in garbage time or spot minutes here and there. Tonight was a really strong showing. 13 points, 5 of 7 from the field. You take that any day of the week from somebody coming off the bench.
Yeah, like the last 4 years, it feels like Indiana's looked for or has been missing, a 3-level scorer at the wing position who can put the ball on the floor. And this Indiana team has 3 of those guys. Like Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, and Nick Dorn are all 3 guys who can put the ball on the floor and score at all 3 levels. And it's a luxury to have at that position, and especially moving forward, like into the year. Like if Lamar Wilkerson gets in foul trouble, Tucker DeVries gets in foul trouble, Darren DeVries has Nick Dorn he can throw in, and the offense is still going to be able to score at high levels, which is such a weapon to have for Indiana.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't have much more to say after that because I think that's a really good point to put that. But Drew, we got a pretty big podcast coming up this week, don't we?
Oh, we do. Brandon Ramsey, KSR Radio or KSR.com, going to join us. We're going to preview that Kentucky game. Zach and I are also going to talk some Indiana football after the Big Ten championship. So, guys, make sure you're tuning into that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Follow the Hoosier on 3 on Twitter and subscribe to TheHoosier.com. You get like all the inside access to On 3, nationally, rivals, even the other sites too. If I'll be honest, I was going to the Notre Dame message boards after Notre Dame got left out of the playoff to see what was going on there, and like stuff like that. You get it all with TheHoosier.com.
And it's just $1. It's just $1. Come check it out. You'll join the best Indiana community there is out there.
Yeah, you literally, if you want to just check it out, it's $1, and then if you don't like it, you can cancel your subscription. But you're not going to do that because you're going to see all the great stuff going on there, and then you're going to be like, oh shoot, why did I wait so long? But
absolutely,
thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of the Hoosier.com post-game wrap-up. We'll be back with another one after the Kentucky game.